Hi, welcome back to La Belle Vie. Today's video is a detailed timeline for the Dan Markel case. And I want to shout out my subscriber LLY8598 for giving me that final push to go ahead and finish it. Now, the information is current as of the public record as of the start of trial. So with respect to testimony that we heard Thursday and Friday, I went ahead and inserted some commentary. Predominantly, it's things that were either new or something that I thought was significant to go ahead and note. All right, let's get into it.
Okay, we'll start with the beginning, divorce proceedings. On September 10th, 2012, Wendy files her petition for dissolution of marriage. And in this, she seeks the majority of time shielding with the children. On September 17th, she also files her certificate of completion of Florida parenting class, which is required under Florida law. What's notable here is she actually completed that parenting course on July 27, 2012. On October 4th, Dan files his answer to Wendy's petition for dissolution of marriage and a counter petition for same, and he requests at least equal time sharing with the children. On December 5th, 2012, Wendy files her answer to Dan's counter petition for dissolution of marriage, and she denies granting Dan at least equal time sharing with the children. Here's, I think, the first significant pleading. January 14th, 2013, Wendy files her amended petition for dissolution of marriage, including a request to relocate to South Florida, as well as an emergency motion to temporarily relocate while the motion is pending. On January 22nd, 2013, Wendy files her family law financial affidavit. This is the affidavit that becomes subject of one of Dan's counter motions to enforce the MSA in 2014. On February 20th, 2013, Dan files his answer to Wendy's amended petition for dissolution of marriage, including her request to relocate. He obviously objects. He now seeks sole parental responsibility on issues related to education, religion, and medical upbringing of the children. He contends that the sole reason for Wendy's request for relocation is for Wendy to be closer to her parents. He mentions in a 2013 email where Wendy claimed she thought relocation was in the best interest of our kids to be closer to family, more access to a Jewish community, and a happier mom. On May 2nd, 2013, Dan files his memorandum of law in support of his objection to Wendy's relocation request. The next day, on May 13th, Donna Adelson, Wendy's mother, emails Wendy and discusses Dan's memorandum of law filed the day before, as well as his February answer to her motion to relocate. In her email, Donna states that the most important part of her divorce is relocation. Bold was in the original, and that this issue is non-negotiable. On all caps and exclamation point is as in the original email. On May 5th and 6th, 2013, Dan files motions to enforce an alleged agreement on electronic communications, i.e. Skype. On June 13th, Wendy files her memorandum of law in support of her petition to relocate. And the next day, on June 14th, Dan files his reply to Wendy's memorandum of law in support of her petition to relocate. Significantly, on June 20th, 2013, the court denies with prejudice Wendy's motion to relocate. In the order, the court sets forth an agreed temporary parenting schedule up through the final hearing on the divorce. And that was set for the end of July. It also includes an agreement that Wendy and Dan shall make good faith effort to facilitate a daily phone call with the children and for a Skype call every 4 days between 6 and 8 p.m.
On June 25th, 2013, Donna emails Wendy with what she terms a plan of action for relocation despite the court's denial of Wendy's relocation petition.
Part of the plan of action Donna included was for Wendy to take actions to suggest that she is converting the children to the Christian faith. Donna explains that she and Harvey have changed their lives this year to support and assist Wendy and the children in every possible way. Donna adds that Charlie has accepted the loss in the office business income for her and Harvey to help Wendy because Charlie loves Wendy and wants only the best possible future for her. On June 27, 2013, Donna emails Wendy again about the plan of action. Donna discusses how the judge may react to the plan. She reminds Wendy that the plan is just an act, bold and underlined in original. Donna expresses displeasure with Dan's religious influence on the children. She also discusses hiring an attorney to negotiate a $1 million offer that they are considering offering to Dan to allow relocation, which is to be split in 3 equal parts among Wendy, Charlie, and Donna and Harvey as third. On July 30, 2013, Wendy and Dan signed their marital settlement agreement, also abbreviated as MSA. And on July 31st, 2013, Wendy and Dan's divorce is finalized. Okay, next on the timeline is what I've called post-divorce. First, in September 2013, Wendy is introduced to Jeffrey Lacasse by a mutual friend. Jeff testifies that he dated Wendy casually throughout the fall of 2013. He testifies that the failed relocation petition was a subject of conversation in the first few dates they had together. On October 31, 2013, Wendy files a motion to enforce the marital settlement agreement, MSA, and for contempt. She alleges that Dan failed to make a lump sum payment of $120,000 and to pay $10,000 to her attorney. The motion alleges that Dan has paid $50,000 of that $120,000 amount. Then on January 30, 2014, Dan files a suite of pleadings, including his response to Wendy's motion to enforce the MSA, a request to produce, and a motion to reduce time to respond to his request to produce. First, Dan claims he actually transferred $54,725, not $50,000. He argues that Wendy had breached the MSA numerous times, which he alleges gives him the right to withhold future payments until Wendy's breaches were cured or resolved by the court. Discovery requests relate to Wendy's Charles Schwab accounts, including any documentation regarding transfer of funds. At this time, Dan has also noticed Wendy up for deposition to take place in February of 2014. On February 4th, 2014, Wendy files a motion for a protective order regarding this deposition. She asks the court deny Dan's request to depose her. On February 14th, 2014, Dan files his response to Wendy's motion for protective order and his counter motion to enforce the MSA and for sanctions. First, he objects to Wendy's objection for a protective order regarding his ability to depose her. But more importantly, his counter motion to enforce the MSA was the first of 2 counter motions that were pending at the time of his murder. This counter motion relates to financial issues. Dan alleges that Wendy filed a false and misleading family law financial affidavit on January 22, 2013, including the omission of a retirement account with Tia Kreff worth over $145,000 and an additional account worth $50,000 at the time of separation, among a couple of other errors. He requests that the court sanction Wendy's conduct, given her position as an attorney and a clinical law professor. On February 17, 2014, there was a court hearing to address the various issues raised in these motions. No court orders were entered at this hearing. The next day, February 18, 2014, Donna emails Wendy about her case strategy. Wendy tells Donna that her attorney must depose Elvis, which I presume is another nickname for Dan, regarding his retirement accounts. She asks Wendy what her attorney can do to be more proactive in the litigation and states that Wendy is seemingly always on the defensive. Donna further tells Wendy that it is important for her to get the parenting coordinator to either testify or be deposed so we can get her to request that Elvis be court-ordered for psychological testing. She adds that if he's this off, perhaps he should not be permitted to take the children out of the country, presumably to Canada, where Dan is from and his family lives. She also asks Wendy, "What happened with the dean? Any help, or do you need to proceed to the provost?" The week of March 7th through 11th, 2014 is the timing of the FSU Immokalee Alternative Spring Break. Wendy was in charge of this trip, and Jeffrey Lacasse accompanied her. Also that same week, on March 10th, Wendy files a motion to dismiss Dan's counter motion to enforce the MSA. She alleges that Dan is unhappy with the MSA and argues he is a disgruntled former husband who can't move on. On March 11th, 2014, Wendy and Jeff are in South Florida to visit Charlie. They meet Charlie and Katie Magbanoa, who's Charlie's girlfriend at the time, at Yardbird, a restaurant in South Beach, for dinner. The foursome grab some yogurt after dinner, then they separate. Wendy and Jeff travel to Charlie's house in Whale Harbor in Fort Lauderdale. Charlie drives separately. Katie does not accompany them to Charlie's home. Wendy, Jeff, and Charlie hang out in Charlie's hot tub. At some point, Charlie's roommate at the time, Dr. Obed, joins them in the hot tub. Jeff flies back to Tallahassee without Wendy the next day, Wednesday, March 12th.
Okay, guys, insert here. Rashbaum, during his opening statement, argued that Sigfredo Garcia tried to kill Charlie Adelson in March of 2014. My assumption, although we have to wait and see, is that this occurred allegedly the evening of the Yardbird dinner. So what I'm showing here is actually me walking from the parking lot and the side of the restaurant and walking up towards the Yardbird, and recall that they were sitting outside that evening having dinner.
On March 26, 2014, Dan files a counter motion on enforcement of the MSA on parenting issues and a motion for contempt and sanctions. This is his second counter motion to enforce the MSA. And again, it was pending at the time of his murder. Dan cites a number of the MSA provisions that he alleges Wendy violated, including a refusal to facilitate video conferencing with the children, or Skype, a failure to facilitate telephone contact with the children, violation of Dan's right of first refusal to care for the children when she is attending activities without the children. He argues that the violations are troubling because Donna, who is frequently asked to watch the children, is a source of parental alienation efforts, and the frequent outsourcing of care to Donna causes Wendy to ignore the preschool director's recommendations that the children not be taken out of school for such occasions. He also alleges violation of her duty to inform him regarding the location of the children when she's out of town, failure to follow clinical recommendations of child development experts, a refusal to communicate and consult with Dan regarding the children's education, creation of conditions for Dan to be disparaged by Donna in the presence of the children, including allegations that the children told Dan that Donna says he's stupid, that Donna is trying to take her sunshines away from her, and that Donna hates him, all leading to potential parental alienation. He further accuses her of engaging in parental gatekeeping by depriving him of his access to the children and refusing to provide access to the children at each child's birthday. Among the reliefs sought, Dan requested that the court enjoin Wendy from allowing Donna to have unsupervised time with the children and to impose appropriate limitations to safeguard the children from being subjected to disparaging comments about him. He also asked the court to award him full provisional decision-making authority over matters relating to the children's upbringing, including religious, educational, medical, and legal matters.
Okay, guys, here's some good testimony. First, Wendy claimed that Dan really didn't mean it when he was trying to preclude Donna from having unsupervised visits with the kids, because she claimed a couple days later Dan asked Donna to take care of the kids, and Donna even made him some banana bread. Wendy also claimed that Donna didn't know anything about the counter motion on parenting issues, but Georgia had the receipts, and she reminded Wendy of an email where Wendy forwarded the counter motion on parenting issues to 12 people, including Donna.
On April 11th, 2014, Dan files his response to Wendy's motion to dismiss Dan's countermotion. On May 5th, 2014, Dan files his last pleading regarding the post-divorce litigation before his murder on July 18th, 2014. This is a memorandum of authorities in support of his countermotions to enforce the MSA and for sanctions. Dan requests censure and sanctions against Wendy and her attorney for his countermotion relating to financial matters. On parenting issues, Dan cites two recent issues he allegedly had with Wendy regarding their oldest child's education. He alleges that Wendy refuses to speak to and consult with him about the children's continuing education, which is why he is seeking full provisional decision-making authority on parenting matters.
Okay, guys, you recall at trial, Wendy testified she wasn't concerned about these counter motions. She thought she would prevail, and she wasn't concerned about being disbarred or censured. However, to counter that, Georgia called Stephen Webster, who was Dan's divorce attorney at the time of his death. He actually was retained by Dan after these motions were filed. And Stephen said, he talked to Dan about some of these motions and he encouraged him to focus on what was really important. And what Dan told Stephen was that what was really important to him, what concerned him, was parental alienation. He was concerned that Donna was trying to drive a wedge between him and his children. And in fact, he told Stephen that he actually heard Donna call him stupid on a Skype call. Like she was in the background and he heard her voice say that.
So on June 4th, 2014, Sigfredo Garcia and Luis Rivera travel from South Florida to Tallahassee. They arrive in Tallahassee around noon and they stay at the Budget Inn Motel that evening of the 4th. They meet Shadrach Nobles in the motel parking lot and purchase cocaine from him. Also on that same day of June 4th, Wendy and Jeff see each other twice. First, Jeff meets Wendy for coffee in the early afternoon. At this meeting, Wendy cancels their upcoming July 11 through 17 trip to California to meet Jeff's parents. That evening, Jeff was with Wendy and her boys at her rented house. He testified that Wendy was a nervous wreck, and he wound up going to the store to buy Pepto-Bismol for her. On June 5th, 2014, the next day, Sigfredo and Luis scope out various locations in Tallahassee, including Dan's home. Sig and Luis scope out Dan's home and neighborhood, including Winthrop Park, and Sigfredo and Luis leave Tallahassee late in the afternoon and arrive back in Miami just after midnight on June 6th. On June 14th, 2014, this is the day that there is a picture with Wendy, Katie Magbanawa, and Katie's friend, which was taken at the Icon, which is the condo that Wendy's parents were renting. Wendy was in town for Father's Day. Now we have two significant events the weekend of June 28th through 29th. First, on June 28th through 29th, Wendy and Jeff take a trip to Gainesville. On Saturday evening, June 28th, Wendy and Jeff have a big fight, and he accuses her of cheating on him. They drive back to Tallahassee the next day in what Jeff describes as the most awkward drive ever. Jeff drops Wendy off at her house. Later that day, Donna and Harvey arrive in Tallahassee. Also that weekend, from June 28th to June 30, Charlie and Katie allegedly take a trip to Key West. Mary Hall, one of the financial experts in the case, testifies that there are charges on Charlie's Amex in Key West for this time period. There are also financial records showing Katie made a few payments to local Key West businesses during this time period. Also during this time period, Donna texts Charlie and asks him if they are eloping. Charlie responds, "No, we are going on a goodbye tour." On June 30th, 2014, Wendy picks up the children from Dan's house. This is when she meets Dan's girlfriend Amy for the first time. Wendy brings Harvey with her to pick up the children for moral support. Okay, the next aspect of the time frame of the timeline is when Wendy is in South Florida, June 30th to July 11th. On July 1st, 2014, this is the date of the alleged jet ski incident between Katie, Charlie, and Sigfredo. Katie alleges that Charlie picked her up at her home in the Lexus, which was pulling his jet ski. As they were pulling out of her parking lot, Sigfredo shows up and causes a scene. Sig gets out of his car yelling, which freaks Charlie out. There are a number of calls and texts from Katie to Sigfredo that afternoon. Significantly, Sigfredo calls Harvey's phone number at 5:20 p.m. It goes to voicemail. Katie also calls Harvey's phone number at 7:43 p.m. It also goes to voicemail. There are a number of contacts between Katie and Charlie and Katie and Sigfredo, all ending around midnight. At 12:43 a.m. on July 2nd, Charlie talks with Harvey for 11 minutes and 42 seconds.
Okay, in Rashbaum's opening statement, he alleges that on this July 1st date, Sigfredo tried to run Charlie off the road and threatened him, and that Sigfredo called the Adelson Institute because he didn't realize that Charlie wasn't part of the Adelson Institute. And so therefore, when he got the emergency phone number, he thought he was calling Charlie. He didn't realize he was calling Harvey's phone number. Rashbaum says that during that phone call, Sigfredo threatened Charlie and specifically said, if you keep dating Katie, we are going to go a mano a mano. I'm going to kill you.
Then on July 13th, 2014, which is a Sunday, Jeff sees Wendy for the first time since she returned to Tallahassee. They have a movie and dinner date. And after their date, Wendy allegedly tells Jeff that Charlie had looked into a hitman the previous summer, that it would cost around $15,000, although he thought it might be $50,000, and that it was chilling. Please note that the court ruled that this statement is hearsay and will not be allowed in evidence in Charlie's trial unless for impeachment.
Okay, as we know, this statement did come in for impeachment purposes in the trial. I'm going to explain this really briefly. So basically, the reason it was able to come in was because Wendy Adelson stated under direct testimony by Georgia, she denied that she ever told Jeff Lacasse anything in confidence about Charlie hiring a hitman. And she also denied that she ever, she nor her brother ever had a celebration dinner about Dan's murder. When this came up on direct examination of Jeffrey Lacasse, Rashbaum objected based on hearsay grounds. Well, it was not being introduced as hearsay, which it is. It was being introduced to impeach Wendy because she said the exact opposite. Now, the Rashbaum made an argument that it shouldn't be allowed in because of fairness reasons, because earlier that morning they had a sidebar, and apparently Rashbaum had specifically asked whether this was going to come up, and he felt that Georgia's response to that was misleading. I don't necessarily think it was, but in any event, the judge was very fair and basically said that he wasn't going to allow it in, but because Wendy was still under the subpoena, she could be brought back and they could basically do a do-over. And that's actually what happened. Apparently Wendy was like halfway home or partway home, had to come back, and she wound up coming back in. And Georgia specifically asked Wendy point blank whether on that Sunday she had said to Jeff that she wanted to talk in confidence, and whether she said that that Charlie had explored all options and it would cost $50,000 or $15,000 or $50,000. Wendy denied it. Georgia then asked her, "Did you have a conversation where you wanted to share something in confidence with Jeff?" She said no. And then Georgia asked again, "Did you ever say any statement about this being other than a joke?" And Wendy said no. And then finally, to basically tie everything up, Georgia asked if on the occasion when she went to dinner a few weeks after the murder with her brother, did she ever tell Jeffrey Lacasse that either she or Charlie had referred to it as a celebration dinner? And Wendy said no. So that basically allowed Georgia to be able to ask Jeff Lacasse questions about that. And then for fairness, Rashbaum was able because Wendy was back on the stand, he was able to then ask whatever questions he was going to ask. And so the fairness issue was addressed. Now, what was funny is Rashbaum didn't ask any questions of Wendy that had anything to do with either of these two statements. His questions of Wendy had to do with whether Wendy or was it Jean McPherson who had originally, pointed the finger at Jeffra Koss in Wendy's police interrogation as being someone that was potentially of interest. Anyway, it got in, which was great for the state.
On July 14th, 2014, which is a Monday, Jeff sees Wendy for the last time at a yoga class. Jeff had spoke with Wendy earlier in the day when she told him she had been locked out of her home. She wound up getting into her house, so they decided to meet at yoga class that evening. Jeff indicates that Wendy's attitude towards him was sweet and loving in the afternoon. However, Jeff testifies that Wendy is cold towards Jeff during the yoga class, and he assumes the relationship is over given her vibe. However, she allegedly asked Jeff if he was still going to Tennessee on Friday that week, significantly the day Dan Markel was murdered. And Jeff confirms that he is still planning on leaving that Friday around 11 a.m. Later that evening, Jeff receives an email from Wendy asking for no contact from Jeff for a week. On July 14th, 2014, which is also a Monday, in South Florida, Charlie and Katie are communicating during the day, and they meet up that evening. Katie is communicating with both Charlie and Sigfredo during the evening. Charlie winds up meeting with Katie at her place around 9:30 p.m., and he leaves around 1 a.m. to return to his home. After Charlie leaves, Katie has a flurry of communications with Sigfredo. On July 15th, 2014, on a Tuesday, Sigfredo arranges for the rental of the Prius. First, he calls Comfort Rent-A-Car in the morning at 9 a.m. However, Sig winds up calling Hybrid Save Gas Rental at 4:28 p.m. He's also communicating with Luis Rivera in the afternoon. Luis Rivera ends up renting the Prius from Hybrid at 6:15 p.m., presumably with Sigfredo by his side, his brother. The Prius is in the area of Katie's residence this evening. Now we reach the time period of the July 2014 trip by Sigfredo and Luis from South Florida to Tallahassee. On July 16th, 2014, which is a Wednesday, Sigfredo and Luis leave Miami for Tallahassee at 1:42 p.m. They arrive in Tallahassee around midnight on July 17th. They rent a room at the same motel, the Budget Inn. Also on July 16th, that Wednesday, Wendy has the children for Wednesday evening as her off-week evening visitation. While she was with the children, she saw Dan at Whole Foods but avoided him because she wanted to spend time with the children alone. Allegedly, Dan found out that Wendy had signed their oldest child up to a new school without consulting him. Dan spoke with the new potential school this day.
Okay, we have some additional interesting testimony here from Stephen Webster, again, Dan's attorney at the time of the murder. Now, as mentioned, Stephen had talked with Dan the morning that Dan was murdered. And Stephen had said that Dan had sent him an email the day before. So Dan had sent him an email on Thursday because Wendy had, unbeknownst to Dan, applied to have their oldest child enrolled in the School of Arts and Sciences, and she didn't even talk to him about it. So he was upset about it.
On July 17th, 2014, which is Thursday and the day before the murder, Sigfredo and Luis scope out Dan's house. Luis testifies that he sees a woman with 2 children near Dan's house. He believes it's Wendy. Sigfredo contacts Shadrick to purchase cocaine. During the drive to meet Shadrick, Sigfredo fires the gun he brought with him, which shoots through the passenger floorboard. The gunshot causes the car to break down, damaging the fuel system. Shadrick offers Sig a ride to an auto parts store. Sig returns and fixes the gas line. Then Sigfredo asks Shadrick to rent him and Lewis a room at a different motel. Shadrick did so at the Roadway Inn on North Monroe Street. Also on July 17th, 2014, the day before Dan Markel's murder, here are Wendy's whereabouts. Wendy testifies that she didn't speak with Dan about their oldest child's potential new school because she had laryngitis. However, she meets a new friend that evening and goes to the food trucks. She also states in her police interview that she had spoken with Daniel, her ex now friend, that week. She also spent hours that week talking with Jane about her relationship with Jeffrey Lacasse. Now we get to the day of the murder, Friday, July 18th, 2014. The below chart is from Sergeant Corbett's testimony, and it outlines the telephone calls the morning of the murder. You can see that the calls start at 12:01 a.m. between Katie and Sigfredo, Katie and Charlie, Charlie and Donna, Katie and Charlie. Then that's all in early morning hours. Then Wendy speaks with Donna, and you can see all of the communications. The red line indicates the time of when Tam was murdered, when he was shot, around approximately 11 a.m. A few things to highlight. 8:09, Donna contacts Wendy. At 8:50 a.m., Dan drops his children at daycare. Sigfredo and Lewis are following him in the Prius, with Lewis driving. At 9 a.m. approximately, the Best Buy Geek Squad arrives at Wendy's house for her TV repair appointment. So Wendy refreshed her recollection with a copy of the warranty for the TV, and it was in her father's name. Wendy said she thought she had scheduled it, but it looks like Donna had scheduled it because she was looking at an email that was from Donna on July 11th, and where Donna said, if you can't make the appointment on the 18th, call this number to reschedule. So that's interesting. It was Donna all along that made that Best Buy appointment, and she made it on July 11th for July 18th. Interesting. The other piece of interesting testimony is Jeff Lacasse testified that that TV, according to him, had been broken since like the middle of June. He said that he called it kind of a cheap TV that you'd see in a dorm room. And in fact, he had kept bugging Wendy and offering to buy a new one because it was annoying because the kids really liked to watch the TV and, they couldn't see their TV in the family room. And he had like rented a movie and then they were trying to watch the movie and it was just a mess. But anyway, I thought that was funny. He also said that he thought it was strange that the kids would have destroyed the TV because how small they were. At 9:02 a.m., Dan contacts Wendy. They do not speak. At 9:12 a.m., Dan arrives at Premier Fitness with Lewis and Sigfredo following him in the Prius. Lewis and Sigfredo wait in the parking lot for Dan to finish his workout and exit Premier. At 9:12 a.m., Charlie contacts Wendy. Then 9:19 a.m., Wendy contacts Charlie. It looks like they actually speak at this point for 18 minutes. At 9:38, Charlie contacts Donna. At 9:58, Charlie contacts Katie. At 10:07, Katie contacts Charlie. At 10:08, Katie contacts Charlie. At 10:09, Charlie contacts Katie. At 10:38, Dan leaves Premier Gym and drives home. Lewis and Sigfredo follow him in the Prius. At 10:48 a.m., Dan calls a teacher to inquire about the children's school that Wendy has set him up for. He's on the phone with Dan when he's shot. At 10:52 to 10:55 a.m., Dan's neighbor hears a loud noise, looks out a picture window, and sees a light-colored vehicle, which he testifies looks to be a Prius, pulling out of Dan's driveway. At 11 a.m., the teacher on the phone with Dan attempts to call Dan back, but the call goes to voicemail. At 11:01 a.m., the teacher texts Dan and asks if he is okay. At 11:02 a.m., Dan's neighbor calls 911. The teacher calls 911 around the same time. At 11:06 a.m., Donna contacts Charlie. At 11:22 a.m., Charlie contacts Donna. At 11:30 a.m., Charlie contacts Katie. At 11:31 a.m., Charlie contacts Katie. At 11:42 a.m., Wendy calls Dan. They obviously don't speak. At 12:30 p.m., Sigfredo calls Katie. Cellular information indicates that he and Lewis are near the area of Lake City, Florida. Lewis testifies that Sigfredo says, "It's done," and Katie says, "I know." Sigfredo tells Katie he wants the money as soon as he and Lewis return home. At approximately 12:31 p.m., Wendy leaves her home. She's on a phone call. At 12:40 p.m. approximately, Wendy takes Trescott as a shortcut on her way to ABC Liquors. She encounters the police roadblock set up for the crime scene at Dan's home. At 12:49 p.m., Wendy buys Bullet Rye at ABC Liquors on Thomasville Road near Dan's home. And you recall that she was buying the liquor because she was going to an engagement party later that evening. Here's a picture of her route. You can see up in the right her home at Aqua Ridge Way. Trescott Drive is Dan's home where he was murdered. This right here is the ABC Liquors. And this over here is the location of Mosaic Restaurant, which is where Wendy was meeting her friends for lunch at 1. Chris Corbett testified that this would have been the more direct route for Wendy to take to go to lunch, and also that there were at least 2 liquor stores in the same plaza where the Mosaic Restaurant was located.
Wendy denied going to the crime scene or near the crime scene, and when asked by Georgia, "So you never turned on Trescott?" she stated, "No. I went to turn on Trescott, but I saw it was blocked by some tape, so she turned around." She also stated that she saw a police car, but no officer. Wendy's testimony was contradicted by Officer Brannon, who was in charge of setting up the perimeter and the crime scene tape. He first stated that you would not have been able to see the crime scene from the corner of Trescott and Centerville Road, as Wendy suggested she was, where she turned around. He said that you would have had to have gone some way down Trescott in order to see the crime scene perimeter. He also stated that he recognized a car like Wendy's, a burgundy minivan. He was familiar with the type of car first because his family owned one, and secondly, he had been informed that that was the car that Wendy drove. He stated that the car pulled up and turned around and did not stop and ask questions.
Now, regarding Sigfredo and Lewis, at some point during their journey home, Sigfredo tells Lewis to pull over so he can dispose of the gun. Lewis remembers pulling off the road near a bridge over water. Sigfredo threw the gun toward the water. This was all according to Luis Rivera's testimony. At 6:46 p.m., Lewis and Sigfredo visit an ATM and Lewis withdraws cash. Security video from the drive-through ATM shows Lewis in the driver's seat and Sigfredo in the passenger seat. Once they arrive at Lewis's home, he allows Sigfredo to take the Prius. Lewis then changes clothes and drives his own car to a bar. On July 18th, 2014, in South Florida, late that afternoon and evening, Charlie and Katie are iMessaging each other. Here's a photo of their iMessages. Katie's asking, "Charlie, how's work?" He says he's been busy. He's about to start a big case after she asks him if he's still at work. And then he says he's finishing. He's not feeling well. Maybe they'll hang out at his house. At 7:03 p.m., Wendy calls her parents to notify them of Dan's murder. This is when she's still at the Tallahassee Police Department in her interview. At 7:11 p.m., Donna, who's in South Florida, calls Charlie, but the call goes to voicemail. At 7:13 p.m., Charlie calls Donna back. At 7:29 p.m., Charlie calls Donna again. At 7:36 p.m., Charlie calls Katie.
Now, here is a good graphic of the telephone calls that occurred on July 18th in the evening. And you'll see there are calls between Sigfredo and Katie and between Katie and Charlie. The last call is at 10:20 p.m., where Katie calls Charlie. And this is, in fact, the last information we have for Katie's phone until the next morning on July 19th. Now, you'll recall with Rashbaum's opening statement, Charlie has a completely different theory on what happened this day. So basically, Charlie receives the phone call from his mom that Dan was shot. He tells Katie he doesn't want to have dinner, he's not feeling well, and Katie comes to see him at his home. He says that Katie's frantic and she's upset, and then that's when she tells him that a friend of hers killed Professor Markel. She tells Charlie she had nothing to do with it, but apparently because she had been blabbing her mouth about that $1 million bribe offer that Wendy's divorce, her friends got it in their minds to kill Dan. Charlie took out all his money he had out of his safe and gave it to Katie because that was when the extortion began. And he was told that if he didn't pay up, either he or someone in his family would be killed in the next, I believe it was 48 hours.
So on Saturday, July 19th, 2014, that's the money drop. As we know, that 9:44 a.m., Katie's phone comes back online, and she's driving southbound from the direction of Charlie's house on Whale Harbor. And during this time, she's constantly trying to contact Sigfredo's phone. And each dot below here that I'm going to show is a call that Katie is making to Sigfredo. Here we show Charlie's house at Whale Harbor. You can see all the dots. That's her trying to reach Sigfredo as she goes further south, and here is Rivera's residence. So at 10:22 a.m., Katie and Louis talk on the phone, and this is when Louis is at the barber shop. Katie tells him that if he wants the money, to tell her where to meet because she can't reach Sigfredo. Louis asks an associate, Latin King Gibbero, to go to Sigfredo's girlfriend's house to pick him up. At 10:23 a.m., Katie tries Sigfredo's phone one more time. At some time during this time period, Louis's girlfriend, Jessica, calls him while he's still at the barber's shop. She tells him that Sigfredo and Katie are at their home with a package for him. So then at 10:25 a.m., Katie talks with Louis again. Around 10:30 a.m., Louis arrives back at Jessica's apartment, and at 10:31 a.m., Katie calls Louis for the final time. Once Louis meets up with Katie and Sigfredo at Jessica's apartment, Sigfredo gives Louis a shopping bag. Louis removes the money from the shopping bag and places it in his pocket. He then leaves with Sigfredo. He counts the money, and Sigfredo had given him the $35,000 as promised, plus he gave him $2,000 extra. And again, what's important here is that Louis testifies that the money was in $1,000 stacks of $100 bills that were stapled. At 11:23 a.m., Corbett testifies that Katie's cell phone starts pinging at a cell tower south of Jessica's apartment in the general area of her friend Yindra Mascaro's house. And if you recall, Yindra testified that Katie's kids had spent the previous night, the night of the murder, July 18th, with her. At 12:13 p.m., Charlie texts Katie and asks if she's taking the kids to the beach. It's so nice. And at 12:18, Katie texts Charlie back and says, "It's beautiful, probably the pool." At 4:54 p.m., Katie texts Charlie back that she's back from the pool.
Question: now that we know Charlie's defense, does this sound like a text exchange for someone that's being extorted?
The next information we know is that on Sunday, July 20th, 2014, that was the day of Dan Markel's memorial service, which was held at a local synagogue in Tallahassee. Detective Isom speaks with Donna and Harvey at the memorial service, and they agree to speak with Detective Isom before they return to South Florida. Then the next day, on Monday, July 21st, 2014, Wendy, Donna, and Harvey leave Tallahassee with Dan's children. Detective Isom calls Wendy, and she alleges to have phone trouble. Her attorney then calls Isom back shortly thereafter, basically says any further conversations to call him. And of course, Donna and Harvey never contact Detective Isom as promised. In fall of 2014, Katie begins receiving biweekly checks from the Adelson Institute. Katie and Charlie break up at some point during this time. Now, I believe it's sometime in the fall of 2014, June Umchinda meets Charlie for the first time at his Whale Harbor home. And this was when she was supposedly on kind of a date with Dr. Obed, who was Charlie's roommate. Then on July 6, 2015, Wendy changes the children's name from Markel to Adelson. On September 24th, 2015, Wendy emails the Markels and notifies them that she changed the children's surname to Adelson to protect them from media reports. Wendy also removed the older child's middle name, which was a tribute to Dan's maternal grandmother. In fall, I think it's in October 2015, June Umchinda begins dating Charlie. Okay, now we're at the bump and the wiretaps. April 7, 2016, the court issues the orders authorizing the wiretaps of Katie and Charlie's cell phones. April 19th, 2016, the bump day. Okay, so it all starts at 1:47 p.m. This is when the bump occurs, whereby an undercover FBI agent, I refer to it as UA, approaches Donna as she walks down the steps from the Icon condo building where she and Harvey are renting. The encounter is recorded by the undercover and from across the street. And the undercover gives Donna a piece of paper with a news article and a picture of Dan Markel regarding his murder. It also has the undercover's phone number and the amount of $5,000. Now, during their encounter, the undercover tells Donna that his brother needs help, just like their family is providing for Katie and Tuto. He also mentions his brother helping the family out with their problem up north. Okay, so at 2:09 p.m., Donna calls Charlie about some paperwork that was hand delivered to her. And I actually did a whole video on Charlie's wiretaps. I'll link that below in case you haven't seen it. But in any event, Charlie asks if it involves him or others, and Donna responds, well, probably both of us. At 2:35 p.m., Charlie calls Donna back. They discuss bringing cash for Donna. 3 o'clock, Charlie calls Donna back. Donna says that the undercover mentioned an ex-girlfriend. And then Charlie also asks what the letter asked for, and Donna replies, this TV is probably about 5. Then at 4:27 p.m., Charlie calls Katie and tells her what he knows. He asks her to meet him in person the next day. And then at 6:07 p.m., Katie calls Charlie. Now, one of the important things to point out here was that Donna, when she's talking to Charlie, she never said Katie. She only said ex-girlfriend. But it was pointed out that, the first person he calls is Katie, and he never calls any other ex-girlfriend. So April 20th, 2016, I'm calling this as the Dolce Vita day. And it starts out, from what we know, at 10:38 a.m. Charlie calls Katie, and he says he's on his way to meet Donna at the Icon. At 1 o'clock p.m., Charlie meets with Donna at the Icon. They go for a walk and talk near Monty's and the marina. And then the FBI, unfortunately, is not able to record this conversation just based on the logistics. It would have been too obvious. At 3:14 p.m., Charlie calls Katie. He's actually in the parking lot of the strip shopping mall where Katie works at Optima Realty. And this is the same shopping center where the Dolce Vita restaurant is. Now, according to Pat Sanford's testimony, Katie and Charlie first talk in his car then go into the Dolce Vita restaurant in that same strip shopping mall. The other thing is, remember that the first 30 minutes of the Dolce Vita recording is unintelligible, and Charlie's defense is going to be able to give the jury an instruction on that point, is that there is the first 30 minutes unintelligible. The bump in any event takes place from 3:45 to 4:45. The Dolce Vita recording, not the bump. And at 4:56 p.m., Charlie calls Donna. He tells her he met a friend for coffee and everything's good. Okay, on April 21st, 2016, that's the Matsuri day. Now, before the Matsuri meeting where Charlie and Harvey meet at the Matsuri restaurant in Coral Gables, it starts off the day with 8:17 a.m. Katie calls Sigfredo and they fight. And Sigfredo says, I'm not making that effing phone call. But then he later says, okay, I'm going to take care of this effing problem. At 8:36 a.m., Katie calls Sigfredo again. And that's when she provides the undercover's phone number in a coded way. At 9:31 a.m., Charlie calls Katie and they talk about properties. What is a good investment? He mentions pricing being too high. And Katie says, that's crazy. At 8 p.m. is when Charlie meets Harvey at the Matsuri restaurant. And the FBI records this meeting. Of note, Harvey says at one point, that's what Katie agreed with you? And Charlie responds, yeah. Then on April 23rd, 2016, the FBI actually sends a follow-up bump letter, or bump 2, to Harvey and Donna's home at the Icon. And the bump 2 letter says, my phone is not ringing, so you don't care about Tato and what he did for you. He knows he is effed, and soon so will you. So on April 25th, 2016, this is when the bump 2 letter is allegedly received by the Adelsons. At 7:04 p.m., Charlie calls Katie and instructs her to meet him near Monty's the next day. I hope Monty's gets some publicity out of this. Anyway, Charlie is outside the Icon when he's talking to Katie, and he tells her, I'm standing outside. I was talking to my parents about everything. Then at 7:33 p.m., Katie calls Charlie as she's arriving at Monty's. And again, unfortunately, just given the timing, and it also is apparent here that Katie and Charlie are also talking on WhatsApp, because Katie actually mentions that in the 7:04 call. So unfortunately, they didn't get any FBI recordings of this meeting. On April 26, 2016, I'm calling that the what's the number day. At 9:48 a.m., Sigfredo and Katie communicate regarding this undercover number. And then Katie calls Charlie because she forgot the undercover number. I guess she didn't write it down. Who knows? So this is at 4:34 p.m. Charlie calls Donna regarding the undercover's number. And of course, Donna doesn't have the number because she said she gave the original bump paper to Charlie. So then at 4:35 p.m., Charlie calls Katie back and he tells her he's going to be home shortly where he can give the number to her. And then at 5:35 p.m., Sigfredo calls Katie and she gives him the undercover number. Now, the next day at April 27, 2016 at 12:25 p.m., Donna calls Charlie and there is a reference regarding that bump 2 letter. He tells Donna they actually called the person, but no one picked up. Now, April 28th was a big day as well. It's, I call it bump 3 day. And this is when the undercover calls the Adelson Institute. And of note, until this day, no one has called this undercover. So at 9 a.m., we start off bright and early. The undercover calls the Adelson Institute and speaks with Erica Johnson. At 9:42 a.m., Charlie calls Donna and she tells him about the undercover call to the Adelson Institute. At 9:44 a.m., Charlie tries to contact Katie 4 times. Finally, at 10:43 a.m., Katie calls Charlie back, and he tells her about Bump 3, which is the undercover's call to the Adelson Institute. And of note, he says, Katie, someone's messing with you, they're messing with me. Someone's messing with me, they're messing with you. It's one and the same. At 11:17 a.m., Charlie calls Katie, and he confirms that, no one's contacted the undercover. So finally, 11:33 a.m., Charlie calls the undercover. How interesting is that? That the first person that actually talked to the undercover is Charlie Adelson himself. At 11:39 and 11:40, Charlie calls Katie. She doesn't answer. And at 12:41 p.m., Katie calls Charlie back. And again, if you haven't heard my wiretap calls video, this is the call where I was having to bleep out so much. Katie, this really shows Katie's personality. She's not some shrinking violet. I'll just put it that way. But anyway, she calls Charlie back and he tells her about his conversation with the undercover. He states that someone's coming up with a lot of effing details. At 1:22 p.m., Katie calls Sigfredo regarding Charlie's call to the undercover. This one's also very telling as well. And so she tells Sigfredo that the undercover mentioned Katie and Tuto specifically. That gets the attention of both of them. At 1:46 p.m., Sigfredo calls Katie that he's going to call the undercover. At 2:00 p.m., Sigfredo actually calls the undercover. He gets the voicemail and he doesn't leave a message. At 2:09 p.m., Sigfredo calls Carly and he tells Katie and he tells her that there was no answer with undercover. At 4:58 p.m., Charlie calls Katie and she tells him the undercover didn't answer the phone. At 7:39 p.m., Sigfredo texts Katie and says he tried to call the undercover 3 times, but no answer. That was a lie. The undercover testified no one called. And at 7:49 p.m., then Katie calls Charlie and says she tried to call the undercover 3 times, but no answer. That's another lie. That's a double lie. There we go. On April 29th, 2016, at 8:45 a.m., Charlie calls Katie. She tells him she's going to take care of the situation, and they talk about layers. At 3:03 p.m., Charlie calls Katie. He tells Katie he bought a GoPro for her husband, Garcia, for his birthday. He doesn't say Garcia's name, but that's who she's talking about. Katie says Charlie should have given him the Ferrari he owns as a present. Katie mentions Charlie's boat and he offers to sell it to her. She says she wants an Escalade. Jeez. Charlie says they'll work out future car situations. I got that from the probable cause affidavit. On May 4th, 2016, we've got Bump 4. And this was a 2:09 a.m. text to Donna from the undercover. Now, at some point during that day, Donna calls Charlie, I don't know what the time frame is, and lets him know that something's wrong. They agree to meet in person the next morning around 11:30 a.m. on May 5th. Okay, now we've got May 5th, 2016. These are the calls regarding that Bump 4 text that Donna received at 2:09 in the morning. Charlie arrives at the Icon and they meet in the pool area. Harvey is present for this meeting. Unfortunately, the FBI was not able to record the meeting. It's a secure area. Then there's wiretap calls between Charlie and Katie and Charlie and Donna. And during a call with Donna, Charlie advises the sooner they pay the $5,000, the better. And again, that was all from the probable cause affidavit. On May 6, 2016, Donna calls the undercover. Now, we know this from the probable cause affidavit. I've never heard this call. If anyone's heard this, I don't think that this is on Fancy's site, but if anyone's heard this, that would be fascinating. I'm assuming we're going to hear this in this trial. But in any event, at 5:03 p.m., Donna talks with the undercover for 8 minutes and 48 seconds. She says she is taking him seriously and she's stressed out. That's probably the truth. She denies knowing anything referenced by the undercover. She suggests that the undercover seek out the reward money instead. The undercover tells her all he is asking for is $5,000. Donna claims she had nothing to do with the murder of Dan. The undercover reminds her this is not going away and that Donna does, in fact, know Katie and what was done for her. Donna continues to deny knowledge, and she ends the conversation by saying she'll call him back. At 11:17 p.m., Charlie calls Donna. Donna gives a disguised report on her call with the undercover, referring to him as a patient. And again, this is all from the probable cause affidavit. I don't think I've heard this call. She says she used a recording app to record the call so Charlie can listen to it, and they agree to meet in person the next day. So on May 7th, the next day at 5:07 p.m., Charlie calls Katie to tell her about a new CD he wants her to listen to. The probable cause indicates this is a reference to the recording Donna made of her call with undercover. Charlie uses the reference of pot-belly pigs, which is code for police, to which Katie says that's not good. I think Fancy Fiction has this call on her channel. I've heard the pot-belly pigs call before. Then on May 13th, 2016, there are 2 wiretap calls from Katie to Charlie. At 3:55 p.m., Katie calls Charlie and complains about the Lexus. Charlie offers his Range Rover, which is titled in Harvey's name, for her use. Gosh, are all of these cars in Harvey's name? At 4:06, Katie calls Charlie back and complains about the cost of fixing her car. Charlie tells her he'll pay for the repair or have his mechanic, Sully, work on it for free. At May 16, at 6:19 p.m., Charlie returns a call from Katie, and Katie complains about her car again not being repaired properly and states that the welfare of her kids outweighs any monetary concerns. And Charlie references the office and that no more patients are bothering him. Katie says, "Well, I'm doing my job. Will I get a raise soon?" Charlie says he'll look into the budget. This one definitely is on Fancy Fiction's site, and I actually also talked about this in my wiretap video. He also thanks her for going up there this weekend and straightening it up. Katie replies, "I was just cleaning up. I'm still cleaning up, though. My job never ends." I remember that quote. Then on May 24th, 2016, Pat Sanford visits Sigfredo at his work. It's around 1 p.m., and at the same time, Detective Isom is at Katie's home. And of course, Katie doesn't answer the door. During Sigfredo's meeting with the FBI, Katie speaks with one of Sigfredo's work colleagues. He agrees to drive by her house to see what's going on. At 11:17 a.m., Sigfredo calls Katie to tell her the FBI came to talk to him. He says he'll talk to her about it when he gets home. Well, that was smart. Early that evening, Sigfredo goes to Walmart and buys 2 burner phones. And then later in that evening, Sigfredo and Katie leave their home and never return. The next day, May 25, 2016, Sigfredo is arrested. On June 1st, 2016, the FBI visits the Adelson Institute with the subpoena for Katie's employment records. And this is where Erica calls Charlie, and we have this on the wiretap, and she tells Charlie she will do whatever he tells her. On June 2nd, 2016, Lewis is arrested for Dan's murder. And remember, he was already incarcerated in federal prison for something completely unrelated. And then on September 30th, 2016, Luis Rivera offers his proffer. On October 1st, 2016, which is a Saturday, Katie is arrested in the morning. And Detective Isom and Special Agent Sanford traveled from Talley to South Florida for the arrest. And she was arrested in an outdoor shopping mall on University Drive in Davie. And she was arrested driving the Lexus. Katie was booked by the Davie police. She was in possession of 2 cell phones. She was allowed to call her attorney, Tara Kawas, from one of the phones. And within 20 minutes of Katie speaking with Tara, Charlie's then attorney, David Marcus, called Detective Isom. And according to Detective Isom, they were actually still in the parking lot where Katie was arrested. And Marcus asked that Isom notify him and if an arrest warrant was issued for Charlie, and Marcus would have him surrendered in Tallahassee. Okay, the last bit on the timeline is that on September 26, 2019, Sigfredo and Catherine Magbanoa's joint trial begins. On October 11th, 2010, oh, that should say 2019. Sorry about that. On October 11th, 2019, the jury finds Sigfredo guilty and there's a hung jury for Katie. On April 25th, 2022, Charlie Adelson is arrested. On May 18th, 2022, Katie's retrial begins. And of course, on May 27th, 22, the jury finds Katie guilty. So thanks so much for joining, guys. I will try to update the timeline as we go through the case, and I'm really excited for this trial to start, and stay tuned. All right. In the meantime, I hope to see you in my next one, and have a great day.